Hello and welcome to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. I'm your host, Amon-Ra St. We are through week 4 of the NFL completely, and now we're not only starting a new week, but we're starting a new month. Today is October 1st, and we're going to go over all the stuff we saw yesterday, plus some interesting storylines we had as a result of week 4. 2 Monday Night Football games on last night. We're going to start off talking about the Seahawks and the Lions. Great game by Jared Goff. Also, some of the storylines I mentioned, talking about the dynamic between 2 coaches and 2 quarterbacks, Aaron Rodgers and Robert Saleh, the comments made there, and Nick Sirianni, and the response that Jalen Hurts gave in order of a question that was given to him because of the identity and the relationship with him and Sirianni. Both of those very interesting to follow up on, and we're going to get to talking about them on today's show, plus the Commanders win and also the other Monday Night Football game as well. A lot to go over on today's show, but before we jump into the action, I'd like to remind you guys, if you have any questions, comments, or opinions you'd like to share during the show, we want to hear about it. Your input is a big part of what makes this show great, so we thrive on your energy and insights. And whether it's a comment, opinion, or question you just have to share, please don't hesitate to drop it in the chat. Now, if you want to make it absolutely sure that your message stands out and gets featured on today's show, there's an easy way to go about that, just by using the new super chat feature we have available to you guys now at the bottom of the chat box. Just click the $ and send in your super chat. This way it guarantees that your message gets on the air, and it's also a fantastic way to support our channel. We rely on your guys' support to keep bringing you the sports content you love, and we appreciate every bit of it. So go ahead, let us know what you're thinking, hit the super chat button, and let's keep this show as exciting and interactive as possible. And also, there is the alternate method, still the tip and donations link, GSMCPodcast.net, where you can still tip, donate, and leave a comment or question there if you prefer. We are so thankful for you guys whenever you guys help our channel out. Hit the super chat button and get involved with today's show. But now we can jump back to talking about football, looking at one of the Monday Night Football games from last night, the Seahawks and the Lions. A great game between, I think now I can confidently say, 2 contending NFC teams just in general in the conference after last night's game. A 42-29 victory for the Lions to hand the Seahawks their first loss of the season. Both teams now at 3-1. Detroit handing or getting into that second place spot in the NFC North, and the Seahawks still firmly in first place in the NFC West division. A much needed performance, I think, pretty much for the Detroit Lions. We talked about the idea of Jared Goff coming into this game, the offense as a whole, maybe being a bit shaky, not being overly convincing through the first 3 weeks, but they definitely shook all of that off and put to bed any sort of doubts or criticisms, I thought, from this game, and Jared Goff specifically, because we look a little bit closer of what Jared Goff did. As perfect of a game as you can get from the quarterback spot, right? 18 for 18 on the night, 292 yards for Jared Goff and 2 touchdowns. He also had a receiving touchdown as well. Everything was hitting perfectly for not only Goff, but for this Lions offense. Then you look at the running game, just as dominant as it usually is. Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery combined for 118 yards. Jahmyr Gibbs tacked on 2 touchdowns as well. And in the passing game, Jared Goff had such a big night, but the receivers as well, obviously having something to do with that. Amon-Ra St. and Jameson Williams both combined for very decent stat lines. Amon-Ra St. had 6 receptions. Jameson Williams chipped in with 70 yards receiving. A lot on that 70-yard touchdown, actually. 80 yards receiving, 70 coming from that 1 touchdown, that 1 play that he had. And on the other side, the Seahawks, I mentioned how both these teams really made me feel good about them going forward. And starting with the Seahawks, looking at Geno Smith, 38 of 56 for Geno Smith, 395 yards through the air, 1 touchdown and 1 interception there for the Seahawks quarterback. And for as much as Geno Smith passed the ball, Kenneth Walker also coming back from injury, he pretty much picked up where he left off, 12 carries for 80 yards and a hat trick of touchdowns as well. DK had a nice night. Jackson Smith and Jigba had a decent night, and Tyler Lockett too. All of them really benefiting from, I think, this offense that I mentioned, run by Ryan Grubb, coming over from the University of Washington, now into Seattle. You're getting numbers like this, and I don't think it's an anomaly or an outlier now, because this is becoming a constant thing with the Seahawks team, and it's very refreshing to see them kind of bring in somebody you might not know too much about, how he gets his first experience in the NFL, and they're flying right now compared to some of the other teams in the NFC. They've gotten off to a great start, and it's crazy to me that Geno threw the ball 38 more times than Jared Goff just in this game, which is nuts. They clearly felt that was the way to continue some sort of momentum, but looking at the game and kind of how it all broke out, compared to the second half, the first half was a slow start after both teams punted on their first drives. Then Detroit just hit the Seahawks with a wave of touchdowns, scoring 3 straight touchdowns on 3 consecutive drives. While the Seahawks did score, they also had some mishaps when they fumbled the ball. They missed a long field goal heading into halftime, and they created a little bit of a difference there. Then the start of the second half was filled with just back and forth haymakers from both of these two teams. The start of the second half had 5 touchdowns between both of these two teams, just back to back to back to back. And eventually you got the score at 35-27 at some point in that second half, pretty early on, in favor still of the Lions. They were still up by 8 points there, but that was as close as it ever got, really, towards the latter half of the game, because Detroit got one more touchdown after that great grab and discipline by Amon-Ra St. Brown to not only catch the ball going towards the sidelines, but get his 2 feet in. Then the defense finally for Detroit, there wasn't much defense at all played in this game, but the defense came up big there towards the end for the Lions. They didn't allow another point after that drive. The safety that the Seahawks got technically wasn't given up by the Lions defense, so they pitched a better game towards the end when Kirby Joseph intercepted Geno in the end zone, pretty much sealing everything at that point. And it was a great contest. If you watched the game, you would have known that very exciting, the epitome of, I think, what the NFL would love every game to be like, obviously, but you get a game like this here or there, and it's very fortunate that it was on national TV. Everybody got to see it, and everybody got to see how good both of these two teams are. That's really what I took away from it, mostly. Even though Seattle they lost their first game, it was still a great showing for them and the Lions as well to kind of legitimize both teams, in my eyes, in my opinion, and Detroit more so than they already were a legit team. But what I mean by that is, you look at the Sunday night football game, right? You have 2 contending AFC teams in that game, the Bills and the Ravens, 3-0 against a 1-2 team that everybody still feels like their record doesn't reflect what kind of team they are. And in that game, we saw the Ravens just beat the brakes out of the Buffalo Bills. And instead of walking away from that game thinking, wow, like we could see this rematch later on, maybe some people felt that way, but I think the majority felt like maybe there's some cause to pause with this Bills team. Maybe there's some doubt about Josh Allen. Maybe there's some doubt about this offense. Are they really that high-powered, or have they just taken advantage of playing a 2-less Dolphins team, a Arizona Cardinals team the first week of the season? I forget who they played in week 3. That's escaping my mind. The Jaguars. Not a very good Jaguars team. Still looking for their first win. You get a bit more of doubt there, whereas in this game, I thought this gave me reassurance about the Seahawks. It really did. How would they be able to keep up with this Lions team, right? This NFC conference achieving Lions team from last year that was very good over the course of the entirety of last year. And this year, they start off 2-1. But they were right there with them. You know, for as good as Detroit is, their offensive line, their offensive players, Seahawks were missing 4 starters, like I mentioned in the preview, on that defensive line. Maybe they throw off Jared Goff if 2 or all of them are playing. We'll never know in this context, but maybe we'll see this down the line. And all four of those guys are playing. How different could this outcome be from that standpoint? So I really like what the Seahawks are doing. I like what they're building there. I like Mike McDonald a lot. Ryan Grubb as well. They're doing great things over there. But from the part of the Lions as well, we mentioned how Goff came into this game throwing more interceptions than passing touchdowns, and then going up against one of the top-rated pass defenses in the NFL. It could have gone maybe either way. Again, the loss of the starters on the defensive line helped a lot, but I don't think anybody would have thought Jared Goff was going to throw a perfect game, nearly 300 yards and 2 touchdowns, really silencing a lot of the doubts around this offense. And it's almost like a shame that they're going to the bye week so soon. You kind of want to see this offense get rolling. But that's their next task coming up. They will be on a bye. They get a break here very early on in the season, and I think this is a great moment now that we can look back on and say that week 4 matchup against the Seahawks was when we really saw this Lions team take off. They're going to be on a bye this upcoming week, like I said, before they take on the Cowboys the following week, which should be an awesome matchup. And the Seahawks, they suffer their first loss, but I don't think this is going to derail them in any way. They play the Giants next week in Seattle back again, so I expect them to win that game and to just continue to be as efficient as we've seen them so far through the year. Very good game from both. I wouldn't say there's a real loser, obviously, other than the scoreboard, but there's no real negative takeaway, I don't think, from the Seahawks game from the Seahawks point of view. Great game overall. The Seahawks are just starting this new era with Mike McDonald, so for as good as the Lions are, I thought this was a good test that they definitely passed. So Andre says the Lions offense looks damn near unstoppable, bro. Yeah, I think if you can't stop the run, it's going to be a long night. That's what they never failed to do, right, Andre? That's what they never failed to do. We knew that running game, that offensive line was going to be as prolific as it was, but I think the passing game was always something that some people had some doubts on. Jared Goff, maybe people not convinced by him yet. And last night was I think the height of what this offense could really be, with Goff throwing the ball perfectly like he did, the running game being unstoppable. There's no real weakness, as you alluded to. This Lions team looks unstoppable, and now we could hopefully see them continue this run going forward. Like I said, a shame that we don't get to see them next week, but that Lions and Cowboys game, a rematch of last year's game where all that controversy happened, is going to be awesome to see. So we'll be looking forward to that. We're going to jump into our next segment coming up after the break, though. The disconnect from Jalen Hurts and his head coach Nick Sirianni. After the recent loss against the Bucs, a lot has been swirling around the future of Nick Sirianni. Can this Philadelphia Eagles team really improve and get better with Sirianni as their head coach? We're going to talk about that after our first break. We'll be right back in just a couple of seconds.